I'm surprised that not a lot of people are talking about triangle strategy. I know that strategy RPGs are a niche genre, but the amount of hype I remember seeing online for Fire Emblem Three Houses was immense compared to this game, and I think that's a shame. Part of me wonders whether Fire Emblem fans are hesitant to pick this game up, or if they're just fine staying in their comfort zone. While I did cover the ins and outs of Triangle Strategy's mechanics and story system in a previous video, I never really directly compared it to a lot of what makes Fire Emblem so popular. And so I figured I'll make a last-ditch Hail Mary effort video to help people who might still be on the fence jump over it and join me in my utility crusade as I destroy everything in my path in order to make House Wolfort reign supreme. Just a quick heads up, there won't be any targeted editing in this video since I've pretty much shown everything that can possibly be shown in the last ones I've made, so feel free to just leave it on in the background and listen if you want. I'll just put on gameplay from Chapter 3 since I haven't really used that footage yet. Anyways, naturally, I'm going to start off with the most important feature that keeps all Fire Emblem fans coming back for more with each subsequent game: the waifus. Well, yes, I'm partially joking, but no, I'm actually serious. The characters in Fire Emblem are generally full of life and personality. A lot of them have quirks that make them endearing and relatable, and we find ourselves attached to them, rooting for and fighting with them as we progress our playthrough. For example, I too am a cynical pyromaniac in real life who seeks to create a better world through my own means, so the character I love makes sense. We want to make them the strongest we can, and if we're lucky and playing one of the newer iterations of Fire Emblem games, we can even marry the characters at the end of our playthrough with our own self-insert avatar. Not all the characters in the Fire Emblem series are made equal, but through things like support conversations, you can really gain access to a depth that these characters possess that you wouldn't find anywhere else. Triangle Strategy doesn't have this. Well, okay, no. I mean, yes, it has the characters, it has those, and the characters have amazing art that could make you salivate and go to websites that I won't mention here, but what I'm talking about is the deep level of development through side conversations. Now I'll take a step back and say that yes, there are optional side conversations. We see this in the prologue demo already in certain scenarios if two characters are standing next to each other. They eventually trigger a short side conversation that adds a little flavor to this character's personality and uncovers a little bit more about them that we didn't already know. However, I don't know if this is a permanent fixture or if it'll be something that's going to truly develop this roster fully in this way. Instead, what Triangle Strategy does is it opts for a different way of fleshing out its characters. The story in this game is dense, and I'll get to that in a later segment, but part of the story are these very interesting exploration scenes where you get to talk to some of your side characters and learn about their positions based on what's currently going on in the story. Along with these is a voting system where you talk to your characters and you try and shift their opinions, so while Fire Emblem develops the characters and their personalities outside of the story, it feels like Triangle Strategy is taking the opposite approach here and weaving in the character development into a more story-relevant manner. Oftentimes, much of the roster in Fire Emblem feels irrelevant outside of one or two chapters where they join or are story significant, and then these are just reduced to side characters who fight alongside you. Triangle Strategy seems to not do that. Sure, you'll get the little quirks like Eridor's loud, lovable big brother persona, but you'll still be able to see his more serious and loyal side when it comes to the main conflict. He has his own interest, and he'll make that known to you, and that will constantly be there and potentially even change throughout the course of the game. I like this, and I feel like it's going to be a fairly effective way of integrating these characters to be a consistent presence in the story as opposed to a side dish that you just wish you had more of. Yes, I'm hungry while I'm writing this. Sue me. Just to note, it also seems like the characters who aren't part of the voting process do show up in your encampment and you can talk to them there, so they're not totally out of the picture either. Anyways, let's move on and talk about the story and world building. I'm gonna say this right out of the gate, but based on what I've seen so far in the prologue demo, this is already above and beyond what Fire Emblem generally does in terms of world building and foundation setting. Of course, this does come at the cost of the story to gameplay ratio. I mentioned this in a previous video, but I spent 4.5 hours playing the demo, of which maybe an hour was actual in-battle gameplay. There is a lot of story and a lot of world building early on, and I think this might actually be a turnoff to a lot of players who are just used to jumping into maps fairly quickly. While Fire Emblem Three Houses had a lot of downtime in between maps, you were generally actively managing your army and actually playing the game. Triangle Strategy can be argued to have a similar phase in the exploration sequences, which are great, don't get me wrong. You find a lot of, story relevant and world building relevant material that you can read and explore later on, but I won't hide the fact that there is a ton of narrative that you're just sitting down and listening to or reading. So far, I've gone out of my way to try and not mention the first demo as much as I can, because that was over a year ago, and at this point, a lot can change, but I will use it here as a counter-argument. I think the early segments of the story will have to be heavier to set the scene and tone and establish the characters, and it'll get a bit faster later on. That demo is proof of it, as the story felt much more compact and to the point than it did in the more recent demo, and I think part of that was the fact that the story was further along. I'm conflicted on what stance to take on this myself, to be honest. As someone who loves a deep story and good writing, I'm totally happy with the approach they're taking and making sure things are thorough and well thought out, but as someone who also has a responsibility to tell it like it is and not sugarcoat it, I don't know if the gameplay-centric or even more laid-back casual portion of Fire Emblem players will enjoy this. The tone feels far more mature and serious with less comedy. The characters feel older, and it feels like you should probably focus on the plot while playing. The level of writing and detail here reminds me somewhat of Genealogy of the Holy War, which is fantastic, but the gameplay is vastly different. So yeah, I guess this is something you're just going to have to judge yourself. Personally, I love it, but I do acknowledge that it might not be for everyone. The major difference between this game and Fire Emblem, however, is the gameplay. We're used to a very distinct line that is the player phase and enemy phase rotation. Triangle Strategy doesn't have that at all. Here, your turn order is determined by your speed stat, and you and your enemies are all in a single phase determined by that. In return, the game gives you tools to manipulate the turn order through upgrading your characters, as well as skills that delay enemy turns or make yours come around more quickly. The combat is still grid-based, but you've got a different sort of camera angle you're playing from, as well as having to take into consideration that attacking from the side and back will increase accuracy and damage instead of attacking from the front, so there's a lot of positioning-based elements here as well. The game also has a lot more stage interactions and elemental interactions as opposed to Fire Emblem, so ultimately I feel like the battle system here is more in-depth and complex, while Fire Emblem has a lower entry bar due to its simplicity. Triangle Strategy seems to have an immensely complicated damage calculation formula too that I won't even try to explain, but it does give you a simulation mode instead, at least to test things out before making your movements. This game also doesn't have permadeath as a feature. It has permanent casual mode instead. If your units die in battle, they retain all the EXP they've gained and come back at the end of battle. I want to assume this is done for story purposes, and I'm not too sure how hard the hard mode is to warrant this, but if you're looking for permadeath, this isn't the place for you. In return though, there's no such thing as the turn wheel or divine pulse to let you rewind or redo your turns. You do have the option to save scum though, so I guess that's a thing if you want to abuse it. I'll spare you the rest of the nitty-gritty details here, I just wanted to highlight a few of the more front and center differences in the gameplay. If you haven't seen my previous video with a full rundown on the gameplay breakdown, there should be a link in the top right corner of your screen right now. The last thing I really want to hammer home is the element of choice you have in this game. Recently, Fire Emblem has adopted the pick a side mentality, starting with Fates and continuing with Three Houses. However, in these two games, you choose your side at the beginning, and you're forced into a series of scripted interactions based on that, and along the way, that gives you the feeling that your choice doesn't really matter. Triangle Strategy does this, but differently. You're offered a series of choices along the way, but instead these contribute towards three main attributes, and based on them, I'm assuming, I don't know for sure yet, but that will eventually decide which route split you go down. Now I know this can cause a lot of decision anxiety and dread of replaying the entire game in order to see the rest of the routes, but this game has a nice way of making your replay experience unique, as each decision will take you to a different map and have you recruiting different units, so there is definitely value in replaying. Also, based on a recent interview with the developers, it seems that a single playthrough will hover around the 30-hour mark, so this game isn't terribly long or grueling to play. And there are a few choices in terms of difficulty, so you can fine-tune your experience however you like. Anyways, I think that's pretty much everything I have to say about this game pre-release. I'm very excited for it, and frankly, I've been very thankful for, and honestly a bit surprised by the overwhelming support the Triangle Strategy videos have gotten on my channel, and I look forward to continuing to cover the game as it comes out. At the moment, I'm aiming to have the first episode of the abridged Let's Play ready to go for Friday. I'll be covering the demo chapters in that one, so it won't really have any spoilers, and then we'll go from there. I'll be looking for your feedback as to how you like that and if you'd like me to change the way I do it, so please feel free to always let me know your thoughts in the comments. I do enjoy reading them and responding to everyone that I can. With that said, I'll see you all again when the game releases. Peace!